Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We just finished up talking about a whole different bunch of NBA topics, all kind of pertaining to the different ways that NBA fans view the game. We talked about Joel Embiid's 65 game minimum and the MVP chase for him. We talked about Draymond Green and his impact, and we just finished up talking about the Boston Celtics and the team-oriented game that they play. Now we are going to be switching off to the NFL here as we are recording this on January 31st. We just had some breaking news this morning, about not even an hour before the show started, that Seattle has just named the Ravens defensive coordinator from the past couple years, Mike Macdonald, to be their next head coach. Macdonald becomes the youngest head coach in the NFL in his late 30s. He has spent a lot of time under John Harbaugh through his career. He's been with the Ravens organization since 2014, but he did briefly have a one-year stint as the defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. But he has been the full-time defensive coordinator for the Ravens the past 2 years, and he has done an incredible job leading them to the number one scoring defense in the NFL this season, and that defense pretty much doing everything that they could, for the most part, against a talent of Patrick Mahomes to give their offense a chance to advance them to the Super Bowl. They obviously fall short, and it's a little disappointing, but Macdonald gets to have his next move. I like the move. Yes, very young, obviously, for a head coach, but that's sort of the direction the NFL is heading in a little bit. And I think that Seattle has definitely struggled on the defensive end the past couple seasons. Now, they improved some this year, part of which they have a good amount of young talent on that defense, mixed with some veterans as well. But you bring in Devin Witherspoon for his rookie year. Boye Mafe in his second season made a jump. Riq Woolen actually sort of dropped off a bit, but he was almost neck and neck with Sauce Gardner as far as rookie cornerbacks last season. And you think that there's definitely still a lot of potential there with Riq Woolen, that he can bounce back. They have some vets, such as trading for Leonard Williams during the season this year. They have Bobby Wagner, who is currently expected to be back for next year. Quandre Diggs as well. So definitely a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball for a team that's been underachieving somewhat on that side of the ball. So I think that this is a good hiring. This leaves just the Washington Commanders as the only team without a head coach currently. And they were heavily linked to Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson for a long time. Ben Johnson took some interviews, but announced yesterday, informed the teams, I should say, that he plans to remain with the Detroit Lions, and his priority is winning a Super Bowl with them. So I know that it has been a tough fallout and aftermath for a lot of Lions fans, but I think that this is very big news for them. I think that it's also very interesting considering just the idea here. Jared Goff, I think, has become a very good quarterback in the league. Now, he is likely about to get a contract extension. He's going into his final season on his contract, and I think that it would be, I could understand it for the sort of logistics of the talent and everything, and maybe still having some questions with Goff, but his number one wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, is entering the final year of his rookie deal. I think that it could definitely disrupt the locker room if you extend St. Brown, but not Jared Goff. So, I mean, we'll see how this plays out. I think Jared Goff is going to be back. I think that having Ben Johnson with him for another year is sort of big to continue to build up this momentum. And I'm sure that Ben Johnson is going to become a head coach at some point in his career. I think that he can help get this other run at a Super Bowl with the Lions next year, and he can sort of help bring along this offense and everything and sort of set them up nicely for the years to come as well. If you're Ben Johnson in this situation, I don't really blame you for not wanting the Seattle or Washington jobs over staying there in Detroit. I think that they have a really good thing going on there. And Seattle, like I just said with Macdonald, I don't think it's a bad job necessarily, but there's a lot less stability. Their quarterback is Geno Smith. He did not look the same this year, and I think that there's a quarterback with the quarterback question and with a lot of weird stuff going on, a little bit aging core in different parts, not a great offensive line, and this is a team that he probably could help rebuild. I don't blame him for wanting to stay with the Lions. Washington is also a mess. I mean, yes, they have the draft capital this year, at least to maybe go get the likes of a Drake May, a Jaden Daniels, and potentially, if they want to, trade up for Caleb Williams. But I think that all in all, this is a good move for him to just, he's still also very young in his 30s, just wait it out, come around next year. I think that between the Cowboys, between the Bills, the Steelers maybe, there are a bunch of very interesting opportunities that could become available next year. So I like this decision on his end. I can understand it, at least getting to some of these other hires that have taken place and just an update on the coordinators around the NFL. The Eagles cleaned house a couple weeks ago, letting go of both their offensive and defensive coordinators. They come in my opinion, make some upgrades on that side of the ball, where they hire Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. He spent his first few years with the Dallas Cowboys, sort of lost play calling duties there, went to the LA Chargers, where they were obviously a very flawed team, and you can partially blame Kellen Moore. He was, in fact, a part of that playoff collapse last year. So some questions there, but I think that it's a fine hire. The Eagles clearly needed to change things up, and I know that refusal of the run game was sort of a thing with him in LA, but I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are obviously more talented in that run game, that ideally he should learn from his mistakes and improve upon that. Defensive coordinator, I think, was the home run hire for them, though. Vic Fangio, I was very surprised when Fangio and the Miami Dolphins parted ways last season after his first season as the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. I thought he did a pretty good job considering the injuries that they were forced to deal with. Jalen Phillips missed most of the season for them, and then down the stretch, they had Bradley Chubb and Andrew Van Ginkel out as well. They had hardly any edge rushers at all. They were forcing a much older Melvin Ingram to be their do-it-all guy. He was dropping back in coverage. He was rushing. He's 34, 35 years old now, and yes, obviously very talented, and I'm not trying to take a shot at Melvin Ingram, but the defense as a whole was just so deteriorated that they didn't really stand all too much of a chance, I thought, come the playoffs. I thought that it was also interesting reading up on why the split between Vic Fangio and the Dolphins happened, and there was definitely a disconnect between him and the players in terms of work ethic and such. He wanted to part ways with them because he didn't think that they worked hard enough, and in turn, when the players found out that Fangio was gone, they were reportedly very excited to have him gone. And I think that there's definitely a discrepancy between the type of locker room that the Miami Dolphins have built up versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Mike McDaniel is a phenomenal coach. I think that he is an offensive mastermind, and he is the definition of a player's coach. He seems very laid back. We're not behind the scenes with them, but I can understand definitely seeing a difference in energy level between him and Vic Fangio. Fangio moving to Philadelphia under Nick Sirianni, who seems like his pants are on fire half the time. He's just always at 100%. He is letting the emotions fly. I think that, especially with that group that, yes, they were underwhelming this year. They had a lot of turnover with their linebackers and in their front seven as a whole, really. I think that Fangio can sort of help resurrect that, be a lot more on top of things. I mean, last year was a disaster for the Eagles on the defensive side of the ball. They changed defensive play callers halfway through the year after a 10-1 start. And not only that, but they changed it to Matt Patricia. Never want to do that. When Matt Patricia is your upgrade, you know that you are probably not in a very good position. So they make the change to Vic Fangio. I really like this hire. Now, so quickly, just to wrap up the Eagles here, a lot of change for sure. This is the second consecutive season they have a new offensive and defensive coordinator, but I think that they upgraded both times this year as opposed to last year where they lost their coordinators to head coaching opportunities, and now they get some new talent in the room for them. The last move that I have, assuming time-wise it works out, is Arthur Smith was hired as offensive coordinator to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Smith was fired by the Atlanta Falcons. He was their head coach the past few seasons after a pretty miserable stretch, to be honest. But I don't seem to hate this move quite as much as other people do. I know that last year was very bad for them, and I thought that he was very bad in trying to handle the quarterback situation. He kept juggling between whether or not Desmond Ridder was their starting quarterback or if it was Taylor Heineke, and he was just sort of contradicting himself throughout the run, saying, oh, well, this guy gives us the best chance to win, and then he flipped to the other guy, and it was a mess there. He had clearly lost the locker room, and at that point he was just sort of doing whatever he could to try and salvage his job, which at that point was kind of unsalvageable. But I thought that he did a really good job during his tenure in Tennessee. He led them to 3 playoff appearances, a number 1 seed at one time. They actually didn't win any playoff games that year, but they did also win they made their way to the AFC Championship game in a different year. And this was with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, who I don't think that Ryan Tannehill is bad as a quarterback in his career. I think that his best years are behind us. I think that he was being wasted a little bit in Miami, and he helped sort of salvage it some, but the identity of that team was Derrick Henry in the rush game, and that was something that we really hadn't seen a running back be the true offensive leader, the number 1 weapon in some years, and he was helping them utilize that to the max to make an AFC Championship game. They ultimately lose to the Chiefs in Mahomes, but if we've learned anything, losing to Mahomes isn't really too much of a true mark against your career resume. I didn't love last year, of course, for the Falcons, but I think that it's a better situation. I got in a little bit of a heated argument with one of my friends yesterday about how Kenny Pickett is the same as Desmond Ridder and the weapons are worse, and that's not going to mean anything. I think that it can't be understated, it can't be overstated, I should say, just how bad the quarterback situation in Atlanta was. Like, if your 2 options are Ridder and Heineke, and you're juggling those 2, you're probably not set up to win anyways. Their weapons are solid, and that sort of takes me into Bijan Robinson here. I also thought that he did not do a very good job of utilizing him, but I think that there was a little more going on behind the scenes, and also I don't think that that was a good draft pick in the first place for the Falcons, taking him as early as they did, a team that didn't have any real contention expectations. I did not like the decision to take him in the first place. You had a young Tyler Algier. Cordarrelle Patterson was extremely effective the season prior. So I thought that it wasn't quite as easy of a gig as people were making it up to be. And I don't think that he has necessarily the mannerisms and locker room buy-in to be a head coach. But as far as upgrading from Matt Canada last season, I think that they probably did so. And I'm curious to see whether or not he and Kenny Pickett can sort of change the narratives that surround him. But that is all that we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow, same time, 2 o'clock. Just a reminder to like and follow. And we will see you then. Thanks for tuning in.